June feels like a gift. The garden is green, the weather is warm, you've done the hard spring work, and everything looks like it's going to be fine. And then, quietly, over the course of about 3 weeks, it stops being fine. Tomatoes sit there refusing to set fruit. Lettuce turns bitter overnight. The zucchini that was practically growing in real time suddenly collapses. 11 mistakes, the exact reason each one destroys your harvest, and the specific fix for every single one. Mistake 1. Watering in the middle of the day. Walk outside at noon in June and look at who is running a sprinkler. You will see it in almost every neighborhood in America. Someone standing in their backyard in the heat of the day, hosing down their garden beds like they're doing the plants a favor. They are not doing the plants a favor. They are doing two things simultaneously, wasting between 30 and 50% of every gallon they're using to evaporation before it reaches the root zone, and in some cases, burning the foliage. The burning is real. Water droplets sitting on leaves in direct sun concentrate heat. Thin-leaved plants like basil, lettuce, and young tomato seedlings show scorch marks within hours. The correct window is before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. Morning is better than evening for one specific reason. Wet foliage overnight is an open invitation for fungal disease. Powdery mildew, early blight, downy mildew, every single one of them thrives on foliage that went to bed wet. Water in the morning and the leaves dry before the cool evening settles in. Deep watering twice a week does more for your plants than shallow watering every day. Shallow daily watering trains roots to stay near the surface, where they're vulnerable to heat and dry spells. Deep watering twice a week pushes roots down, where the soil is cooler, more stable, and retains moisture longer. 1 deep soak versus 7 shallow sprinkles. The deep soak wins every time. Mistake 2. Fertilizing your tomatoes with the wrong thing at the wrong time. Most gardeners know they need to feed their tomatoes. What most gardeners don't know is that the type of fertilizer matters more in June than it does at any other point in the season, and getting it wrong produces exactly the opposite of what you want. Here is what happens. You buy a general-purpose fertilizer, something with a high nitrogen number, because nitrogen makes plants green and growing. You apply it in June because the plants look like they need a boost. 6 weeks later, you have the most magnificent tomato plant you have ever grown, 8 feet tall. Thick stems, enormous dark green leaves, and almost no fruit. Nitrogen is a leaf-building mineral. In spring, when you want growth and establishment, it is exactly right. In June, when your tomatoes are transitioning from vegetative growth into flowering and fruiting, high nitrogen tells the plant to keep making leaves instead of making tomatoes. You have fed it into a permanent growth cycle at the exact moment it needed to shift gears. Switch to a phosphorus and potassium-forward fertilizer in June. Look for a product where the middle and last number on the label are higher than the first. Phosphorus supports root development and flower formation. Potassium supports fruit development and disease resistance. Both of those are what your tomatoes need from June forward. Feed once every 2 weeks, not once a week. Container tomatoes need slightly more frequent feeding than in-ground plants because rain and regular watering flush nutrients out of the container mix faster. But more is not always more with fertilizer. A plant pushed too hard with too many nutrients in June will prioritize growth over fruiting regardless of which nutrients you use. Mistake 3. Not thinning your fruit trees. If you have a peach, apple, plum, or pear tree producing fruit right now, go outside after this video and count how many fruits are clustered together on a single branch. If you have 3 or more sitting within an inch or 2 of each other, that tree is currently on a path toward producing a disappointing harvest, and you have about 2 weeks to change that. Fruit thinning is the practice of removing the smaller, weaker fruitlets from clusters so the remaining fruit has room to develop properly. It sounds counterintuitive. You waited an entire year for fruit, and now someone is telling you to pull it off the tree. But the biology is not complicated once you understand it. A fruit tree has a fixed amount of energy it can direct toward fruit development in a season. That energy does not scale up to cover every fruitlet that sets. If there are 80 fruitlets on a branch that can only properly supply 40, the tree distributes that energy across all 80. The result is 80 fruits that are small, lack sweetness, and often drop prematurely or crack before ripening. Remove 40 of those fruitlets now, and the tree puts full energy into the remaining 40. They grow larger, develop more sugar, and ripen evenly. For apples and pears, leave 1 fruit per cluster, ideally the largest and most central one, with 4 to 6 inches between fruits on the branch. For peaches and plums, 3 to 4 inches between fruits is sufficient. Yes, it looks dramatic to pull that much fruit off a loaded branch. Your harvest in September will not look dramatic. It will look like exactly what you were hoping for when you planted that tree. Mistake 4. Ignoring your bolting vegetables. This one costs gardeners their entire cool season harvest every June, and the frustrating part is that it happens fast. 1 week your spinach looks perfect. 10 days later it is sent up a tall, flowering stalk. The leaves are bitter, and the whole plant is functionally over. Bolting is a stress response. When a cool season plant experiences rising temperatures and lengthening days, it interprets those signals as the end of the growing window and shifts its energy from producing edible leaves to producing seeds. Lettuce, spinach, cilantro, arugula, and broccoli all do this in June. Once the bolt has started, it cannot be reversed. The plant has made its decision. There are 2 things you can do. The first is prevention. Shade cloth over cool season beds in June cuts soil temperature by 8 to 12 degrees and delays bolting by 2 to 4 weeks in most American growing zones. This is not a minor extension. It is the difference between a full harvest and watching your lettuce send up flower spikes in the first heat wave. A 30 or 40% shade cloth, available at any garden supply store, draped over a simple hoop frame above your cool season beds, extends your usable harvest window significantly. The second thing you can do is accept the timing and plan around it. Cool season crops belong in spring and fall in most of America. June is the cutoff. Plant heat-tolerant varieties like Jericho romaine or slow bolt cilantro if you want to push into summer. For everything else, pull the plants when they bolt, amend the bed with compost, and plant your summer succession crop into that space. That bed is not wasted. It just changed jobs. Mistake 5. Pinching out tomato suckers only once. Every gardener who has grown tomatoes for more than 1 season knows that suckers need to be removed. The small growth that appears in the joint between the main stem and a branch will become a full secondary stem if left in place, and that secondary stem will produce its own suckers, and the plant eventually becomes a sprawling, unmanageable tangle that puts energy into structure rather than fruit. What most gardeners do not realize is that a single pass through the tomato plants in late May or early June is not enough. Suckers grow back. New ones emerge from new joints every week through the growing season. A tomato plant you suckered on June 1st and haven't touched since has already grown 4 or 5 new suckers by June 21st. Check indeterminate varieties, which includes almost all beefsteak, heirloom, and many cherry tomato varieties, every 5 to 7 days through June and July. Each check takes 3 minutes per plant. You are looking for growth emerging from the Y-shaped junction between the main stem and any established branch. Pinch them out when they are small, under 2 inches, because at that size they come off clean with a pinch of the fingers, they heal fast, and the wound closes before disease has a chance to enter. Leave the first 2 or 3 suckers below the first flower cluster on your plants if you want a multi-stem plant for heavier overall yield. That is a legitimate technique, but do it deliberately. Train those stems to a support, and then remove everything else. What you are not doing is leaving every sucker that forms and wondering in August why your tomatoes taste watery and the plant has stopped setting new fruit. Mistake 6. Mulching too thin or not at all. June is the month when mulch earns everything you paid for it or doesn't. By the time peak summer heat arrives in July and August, the soil in an unmulched bed loses moisture at a rate that makes daily watering a requirement rather than a choice. Mulch cuts that moisture loss by over 70% in the top 6 inches of soil, which is exactly the zone where the majority of vegetable root activity happens. The problem is application depth. Most gardeners put down 1 inch of mulch, pat themselves on the back, and wonder why it doesn't seem to be helping. 1 inch of mulch does almost nothing by July. The material settles, it compresses, and it breaks down. The effective thermal and moisture retention benefit of mulch starts at 3 inches and becomes genuinely impactful at 4 inches. 4 inches of wood chip mulch around your tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and squash holds moisture, suppresses weed germination, moderates soil temperature, and as it breaks down at the bottom of the layer, adds organic matter back into the soil. Keep mulch pulled back 2 to 3 inches from the base of plant stems. Mulch piled against a stem creates a consistently moist, dark environment at the soil line, which is prime territory for crown rot and fungal disease. A ring of bare soil immediately around each stem, with the mulch layer beginning a few inches out, gives you all the benefits without the disease risk. Straw, wood chips, shredded leaves, and even cardboard under a top layer of wood chips are all effective. The specific material matters less than the depth and the consistent replacement when the layer breaks down. This is the middle of this list, and if any of these have hit something you've been doing in your garden, I want to know about it in the comments. More than that, if you have been watching this channel and have not hit subscribe yet, here is your second reminder and your last friendly one. Every week this channel puts out content at this level, specific, zone-aware, built around the actual problems real American gardeners run into. If you find this useful, the subscribe button, make sure you see the next video too. It is right there. It takes one tap. Mistake 7. Planting heat-sensitive crops after the June window has closed. Walk through any garden center in the second half of June and you will still find racks of cucumber seedlings, summer squash starts, and bean transplants for sale. The garden center will sell them because the garden center needs to sell plants. Whether those plants have time to produce a meaningful harvest before your first fall frost is not the garden center's concern, it is yours. Cucumbers need 50 to 70 days from transplant to harvest. Summer squash needs 45 to 60 days. Bush beans need 50 to 60 days from direct sow to harvest. If you are in a zone with a first frost in late September or October, which covers a substantial portion of the northern United States, the math on a late June planting of these crops is uncomfortably tight. You are looking at plants that may just be reaching full production when the first frost ends the season. The fix is not to skip these crops. The fix is to know your first fall frost date and count backward before you buy or plant anything. Your local cooperative extension service publishes first frost date averages for your county. That date is your deadline. Count backward the number of days to maturity printed on the seed packet or plant tag, add 2 weeks for establishment, and that gives you the last reasonable planting date for each crop. Plant after that date, and you are gambling with your harvest window. For gardeners who missed the window for cucumbers and squash, those beds are not wasted. Direct sow a fast fall crop. Radishes mature in 25 days, salad turnips in 35 to 45 days, arugula in 30 days. Kale, planted in late June or early July in most northern zones, will come into peak production right when fall temperatures make it taste better than anything you grew all summer. Mistake 8. Watering inconsistently on your fruiting crops. This one destroys more tomatoes than any disease or pest on this list, and it is almost entirely preventable. Blossom end rot. If you have grown tomatoes, peppers, or squash for more than a season, you have probably seen it. The leathery black or brown spot on the bottom of the fruit, usually appearing just as the fruit is starting to size up. Most gardeners assume it is a calcium deficiency and add calcium to the soil. Sometimes that helps. Often it doesn't, because the calcium was there the whole time. The problem was that inconsistent watering prevented the plant from moving it. Calcium travels through plants dissolved in water. It moves with the flow of water from roots to growing tissue. When soil moisture swings sharply between wet and dry, that movement is disrupted. The growing tip of the fruit, which has no direct connection to the leaf system and cannot pull calcium the way leaves can, becomes calcium deficient even when the surrounding soil has plenty. The cell walls at the tip break down. The tissue dies. Blossom end rot. Consistent moisture is the solution, not constant moisture, not waterlogged soil. A consistent pattern of water that keeps the top 6 inches of soil evenly moist rather than cycling between drought and flood. Drip irrigation or a soaker hose system, even a basic one, does this more reliably than hand watering because it delivers water slowly at the root zone rather than in a large volume that runs off or sits on the surface. A timer on a drip system eliminates the inconsistency entirely. If you are hand watering, water deeply, less frequently, and on a schedule. Pick your watering days and stick to them. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever pattern works for your schedule, but make it regular. Your plants will adjust their root development to match a predictable pattern. When that pattern disappears, so does the reliable delivery of nutrients to developing fruit. Mistake 9. Letting pest populations establish before you act. June is when insect populations accelerate. Not gradually, fast. A single aphid colony on a pepper plant can double in size every 4 to 5 days under optimal conditions. A cucumber beetle infestation that looks manageable on June 10th can defoliate a young plant by June 25th. The window between noticing a pest problem and losing the plant is much shorter in June than it is in May. Most gardeners inspect their plants when they water them. Most of those inspections look at the top of the leaves and at the fruit. The underside of leaves is where aphids, spider mites, and whiteflies establish first. By the time a population is visible from above, it has been present and growing on the undersides for a week or two. Flip leaves when you water, turn them over, and actually look. A pest population caught at 10 to 20 insects can be knocked back with a strong spray of water, neem oil, or insecticidal soap applied directly to the underside of affected leaves. A population that has been quietly building for 2 weeks requires significantly more intervention and has likely already done damage you can't undo. For squash vine borers, which devastate zucchini, yellow squash, and pumpkins across most of the eastern United States, the adult moth lays eggs at the base of squash stems in June. The eggs hatch, the larvae bore into the stem, and by the time the plant begins wilting, the damage is already internal. Row cover over your squash plants until they begin flowering is the only fully effective prevention. After flowering begins, the cover comes off to allow pollination, and the primary egg-laying window has largely passed. Physical barriers, consistent inspection, and early intervention take less time per week than dealing with a crop lost to pests that had 2 uninterrupted weeks to establish. The math there is not complicated. Mistake 10. Skipping the harvest. This one sounds like a strange problem to have, and yet it is one of the most common June mistakes that garden beds across America make every year. The plants produce more than expected. Life gets busy. You miss a few days of checking the garden. You come back and find zucchini the size of a baseball bat, lettuce 3 times past its ideal harvest window, snap beans that have gone fully fibrous and seedy inside. Overripe vegetables on a plant are not just wasted food. They are a signal to the plant that reproduction was successful. Once a plant has produced a fully developed, seed-bearing fruit, the biological pressure to produce more is reduced. Cucumbers left on the vine to turn yellow and balloon tell the plant it has completed its reproductive goal. Production slows. More cucumbers come in smaller, fewer numbers. Zucchini and summer squash need checking every 2 days at peak production. Every 2 days. A zucchini that was 5 inches long on Monday will be 14 inches and woody by Thursday in warm June temperatures. Harvest at 6 to 8 inches for the best flavor and texture, and the plant will produce the next fruit faster because it has not been allowed to put energy into seed development. Snap beans should be harvested before you feel any seeds bulging under the pod skin. Cucumbers should come off before they yellow at the blossom end. Kale leaves should be taken from the outside while the central growing tip keeps producing. Regular harvesting keeps every one of these crops in active production mode from June all the way through their season. One missed week shifts them from production into senescence earlier than they would otherwise go. Mistake 11. Skipping the soil check after spring crops come out. When your peas finish, when your early lettuce bolts, when the spring broccoli gets harvested and the stalk pulled, most gardeners plant directly into that space. They figure the bed was good enough to grow a spring crop, so it is good enough to grow a summer crop. Sometimes that logic holds. Often it doesn't, because cool season crops and warm season crops draw on the soil differently, and a bed that has been productive since March may be measurably depleted by June. Before you plant anything into a bed that just finished a spring crop, do 2 things. Work in an inch of compost. Not into the top inch of soil, but dug in 6 to 8 inches. Roots go down. Organic matter worked shallowly does not benefit roots that have already pushed below the compost layer. Dig it in, turn the bed, and let it sit for 5 to 7 days before planting into it. The second thing is a pH check on any bed where your spring crops showed yellowing, poor growth, or production that didn't match what you planted. Inexpensive soil pH test kits from any garden center take 3 minutes to use. The result tells you whether the soil is acidic or alkaline. Most vegetables want a pH of 6.0 to 7.0. Outside that range, nutrients that are present in the soil become chemically unavailable to plant roots regardless of how much you fertilize. You can pour compost and fertilizer into a bed with a pH of 5.2, and the plants will still struggle because the soil chemistry is locking those nutrients away. Lime raises pH in acidic soil. Sulfur lowers it in alkaline soil. Both are inexpensive and widely available. Both work slowly, which is why the check and the adjustment happen now, in June, before the summer crops go in and discover the problem themselves. 3 rules that cover everything above. Rule 1. Check your garden every 2 to 3 days, not once a week. Most of the problems on this list are manageable when caught early and difficult or impossible to fix when caught late. 2 days is the difference between a pest colony of 20 and a pest colony of 300. 2 days is the difference between a harvestable zucchini and a vegetable the size of your forearm. Build the walkthrough into your morning or evening routine. Rule 2. Feed the soil, not just the plant. Every application of fertilizer feeds the plant directly. Every application of compost feeds the microbial life in the soil that makes nutrients available to the plant, improves drainage, improves moisture retention, and builds the long-term health of the bed. Synthetic fertilizer without organic matter is a short-term loan with compounding interest. Compost is the investment. Both have their place. Compost is the non-negotiable one. Rule 3. Water decisions are your most impactful daily decision. More crops fail in American gardens from incorrect watering than from any other single cause. Too much, too little, at the wrong time of day, inconsistently. Every one of those versions produces a different failure mode. The timing and consistency of your water is more important than almost anything else you do in June. Get that right first. June is the month that decides whether August feels like a triumph or a disappointment. The plants you're managing right now, the decisions you make this week about when to water, what to pinch, what to harvest, what to pull and replant, all of it compresses into the harvest you'll be standing in front of 2 months from now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell so the next video actually reaches you, because we go this deep every single week and there is always something specific and useful coming. The gardeners who subscribed at the beginning of this video are already ahead of the ones who'll find it in August when some of these mistakes have already done their damage. Drop one comment below before you close this. Tell me which mistake from this list hit closest to home and tell me what zone or state you're growing in. I read every one. I respond to as many as I can, and what you tell me down there determines what I make next. Now close the tab and go check the garden.